You know, there's a battlefield where entire wars are won and lost before a single shot is ever fired. It's a place of silent, invisible conflict, and it is the most dangerous game in the world.
What if the choices that are made in quiet rooms, choices based on pure logic and psychology, hold more power than any army? This isn't some kind of science fiction. It's the hidden logic that governs our world. Because I promise you, once you understand the rules of this game, you are never going to look at a news headline or a political standoff the same way again. Okay, let's get into this.
We tend to think of war as just chaos, right? Explosions and brute force. But behind that curtain, it's actually a series of strategic moves and countermoves. It's a game played on an almost purely psychological level, where the real goal is to outthink your opponent, not just outfight them.
See, they're not just reacting to what's happening. They are making calculated moves based on what they expect their rival to do next. It becomes this dizzying spiral of, I think that you think that I think. And in a game like that, a single miscalculation can be absolutely catastrophic.
I mean, how can we possibly predict what world leaders are going to do when the stakes are so incredibly high? Well, it turns out there's a framework for understanding all this madness. There are, believe it or not, rules.
The key to unlocking this whole unseen battlefield is something called game theory. But don't worry, we're not about to get lost in a bunch of academic formulas. We can explain the entire core principle with a scenario you probably already know.
So just imagine two cars driving straight at each other on a single-lane road. The first driver who swerves is the chicken. They lose face, they're humiliated. But if neither of them swerves, well, they both lose everything. This one simple setup explains a shocking amount about international conflict.
Let's break down the choices here. If you drive straight and your opponent swerves, you're the hero. Total victory. If you swerve while they drive straight, you look like a coward. Humiliation. If you both swerve, okay, it's a compromise. You both survive. But if you both drive straight, it's mutual disaster. The worst possible outcome for everyone involved.
You see, this isn't just a thought experiment. For 13 days in our history, this exact game was played for real, with the fate of the entire world hanging in the balance.
Of course, I'm talking about the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Soviet Union had placed nuclear missiles in Cuba, just 90 miles from the U.S. coast. The two superpowers were now driving straight at each other, and neither side wanted to be the first to swerve.
The tension was escalating by the hour. President Kennedy's advisors were pushing him toward a full-scale military strike. The world was closer to nuclear annihilation than it has ever been, before or since. Every single tick of the clock was another move in the game.
So here's the crucial part. How this all maps onto our game of chicken. An airstrike, that's driving straight. A naval blockade, on the other hand, was a kind of swerve. It was a less aggressive move. For the Soviets, keeping the missiles there was driving straight. Withdrawing them was swerving. And in the end, both sides made these small swerves, which led to a tense compromise that literally saved the world. But it also revealed a terrifying new strategic tool.
This crisis taught us something profound. A strategist named Thomas Schelling argued that the most powerful weapon in this game wasn't certainty. It was the threat of uncertainty. It was weaponizing the shared fear that things could spiral out of control by accident. That fear itself became a form of leverage, and it led to a really unsettling strategy.
So what if, in a game of chicken, you could convince the other driver that you're just crazy? What if you could make them believe you've ripped out your own steering wheel and you're flooring the gas pedal? Well, all of a sudden, swerving becomes their only logical option. This is the whole idea behind the madman theory.
Now, it's not about being genuinely insane. It's about making your opponent believe you're so unpredictable, so willing to risk total disaster that your threats, even the ones that seem self-destructive, have to be taken seriously. You make them think you're capable of absolutely anything.
It's a calculated performance, really. You create a situation where the other side feels like they are the only sane one in the room, the only person who can stop this thing from ending in disaster. You basically force them to be the one to swerve, which hands you the victory.
And leaders throughout history have used this playbook. During the Yom Kippur War, President Nixon put U.S. nuclear forces on high alert, signaling he was maybe unpredictable enough to risk it all, which forced the Soviets to back off. We see echoes of this today, when leaders use these veiled threats to create strategic uncertainty. It's really just a modern version of Sun Tzu's ancient wisdom: appear where you are not expected, and you gain the upper hand.
But look, this high-stakes psychological game didn't just end with the Cold War. It's constantly evolving.
New technologies are creating new strategies and, yeah, new risks. The core logic, though, it hasn't changed one bit.
Right now, in the silent standoffs in the South China Sea, in the invisible battles happening in cyberspace, and in high-stakes economic negotiations, these exact same principles of deterrence and calculated risk are defining the global power struggle as we speak. Today's players just have new tools for the same old game. They use something called asymmetric warfare, which is just a fancy way of saying you use your opponent's strengths against them. So instead of building a massive aircraft carrier, maybe you build thousands of cheap sea mines to make that carrier useless. Nations are now deploying swarms of autonomous drones and waging economic warfare, all designed to find and exploit an opponent's hidden weak spots without ever firing a shot.
The game has become quieter, more subtle, but it's no less dangerous. It's this constant dance of positioning and posturing where the real goal is to win without ever actually having to fight.
And this is the paradox. For all of its terrifying logic, this game of nuclear chicken has, so far, actually worked. The fear of mutual destruction has been an incredibly powerful force for restraint. That worst possible outcome, disaster, has been avoided for over 75 years.
But that balance is so fragile. This game was designed for two rational players. Now we have more nuclear states, non-state actors, and the truly terrifying prospect of AI making split-second strategic decisions. The risk of a fatal miscalculation gets bigger every single day. The game never stops, and it only has to be lost once.